to the coordinator of Ignite for Change, our virtual special guest this evening, Ms. Renata Ram, the country director of UNAIDS Pacific Office, our panelists, and our respected audience. Nisambula Vinaka, Talo Falawa, Malolele, and a very warm Pacific greetings to you all. My name is Virginia Pewamu. I'm a member of Ignite for Change, and I will be your moderator this evening for this Talanoa session. August has been set aside as International Youth Month, celebrating young people's work in societies. Thank you all for tuning in on Zoom and our Facebook page. COVID-19 impacts people from many walks of life, with young people playing a very crucial role in the outbreak's management and recovery. So much about how the disease impacts young people is still yet to be understood. Governments are required to guarantee that their programs suit the needs of youths. It is critical that youth views are heard alongside of other community members and patients on health and non-health actions to respond to COVID-19 being implemented. This Talanoa session this evening are created to generate youth stories and how young people are becoming more innovative and resilient amidst this COVID-19. Please note that the views expressed on this Talanoa session are that of individuals and do not reflect on Ignite for Change as a whole. The coordinator of Ignite for Change, Mr. Bros, will introduce our virtual special guest this.
Thank you so much, Virginia, for the short introductory remarks this morning, or this evening rather. And of course, to those that are tuning in live on our Facebook platform, as well as those that are tuning in on Zoom, a very good evening to you all. To the special virtual guest, Ms. Renata Ram, the UNAIDS Country Director, and of course to our two exceptional panelists, Ms. Hosanna Kabakoro from Duatani, Fiji, and of course, Kaloucava. Thank you so much, ladies, for taking our time this evening to join us for this important discussion. Well, as Virginia had already highlighted, these Talanoa sessions are to stimulate conversations, particularly with young people, to also bring about together the youth issues that affect them on a day-to-day basis. As Virginia had also alluded, that COVID-19 has placed an exceptional position for young people, whereby young people need to work extra harder in ensuring that their rights as well as their voices are heard and recognized. What a wonderful way in which we're using digital space as the new form of our communication, and something that, of course, many young people, as they say, are tech savvy. We also would like to acknowledge those that are tuning in, but at the same time to also take heed of all the conversations that will be taking place. As alluded to by Virginia, that all the views expressed on this call, especially from our panelists, are that of them and do not reflect those of Ignite for Change. We'd also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge our donor partners that have played a crucial role in our work in ensuring that young people's voices are heard. Please also note that this Talanoa session is for you, young people, and we ensure that a lot of young people will take full advantage of these opportunities, as well as, of course, that further Talanoa sessions be created specifically youth-centric. With those few words, I'd like to thank you all for tuning in, and also just at this point in time, can I introduce our special virtual guest this evening? Our special virtual guest this evening is none other than Ms. Renata Ram. Ms. Renata Ram is a medical practitioner by profession with vast years of skills, not only in Fiji, but also the Pacific region, in particular with HIV and AIDS. She also has a master's degree and has also completed her studies at the Fiji School of Medicine. Ms. Renata Ram is also very keen in supporting youth-led initiatives such as this. And we do value you, Ms. Renata Ram, for taking out your time to join us this evening. With those few words, I'd like to give Ms. Renata Ram the floor.
Thank you so much, Broderick. And good evening, members of tonight's panel, our friends from Ignite for Change, to all the viewers joining in through Zoom and Facebook Live, and most importantly, to all the young people with us tonight. It is my privilege to be here representing UNAIDS, which is the joint UN program on HIV/AIDS, at tonight's Talanoa Session in celebration of International Youth Month. Congratulations to Ignite for Change for organizing this Talanoa Session on a very important topic on young people's role in building back better. Today, the world is home to more young people now than at any other time in history. So demographically speaking, young people are the most vital and key population in stirring any developmental progress. Besides societal demographics, young people are the architects and builders of the future of our world. Today in the world, we are now facing one of the greatest challenges of our time, COVID-19. And unfortunately, those impacted the most are young people. While the direct health impacts of the virus on young people has been less than that of other age groups, the disruptions caused by the pandemic will disproportionately have higher and longer term impacts on them. The global pandemic has led to disruptions to the education system and unemployment levels among young people. These disruptions have had domino effects on the mental health and well-being of young people and has aggravated a multitude of many other socio-economic challenges, including human rights violations and domestic abuse. Despite these challenges and the negative stereotypes associated with young people continue to demonstrate resilience and agility through voluntary service and community-based interventions. The creativity and innovation of young people should take center stage in shaping the discussions on how we can build back better in response to COVID-19. How we take the lessons learned from this pandemic will help us be stronger and better prepared for the next crisis, which is the climate emergency that is an everyday reality for us here in the Pacific. The climate crisis poses an urgent threat to our environment, our health, our communities, our national security, and our economy. Now we have a generation of young people who have seen firsthand the impacts of a truly global crisis. For the youth voices concerned about the climate emergency, this pandemic may well only harden their determination. But how do we build back better to mitigate the risk of our Pacific livelihoods and culture against future crises? Throughout history, there has been many lessons learned after global crisis. If you take, for example, World War II, this forever changed the perception of women in the workforce. While men were out at war, women took lead in continuing economic activities. And this shift led to women entering the workforce after the war. Also, the technologies of medicine developed for warfare were then used after the war. Products that we use today, such as microwaves and computers, these are some of the technology that was used for warfare, which were later then used in other products that we enjoy today. and the medical technology was used to improve blood transfusion, skin grafts, and trauma treatment. Even the Spanish flu of 1918 gave us the starting point on methods needed in dealing with outbreaks from public health restrictions and early vaccine research development. And if we look locally, already here in Fiji, we are seeing innovation and creativity that has emerged because of the pandemic. Many young people have started up businesses in food, homeware, fashion, carpentry, gardening, and the list goes on. The question is, how can we take young people's experiences, innovation, and creativity to the political arena and make policy change? UNAIDS has a very strong position on young people. We believe that young people should not be bystanders on decisions that affect them. Youth need to be empowered and need to be included in decision-making, and not just having their voices heard, but being actively engaged in decision-making and policy implementation. And this is non-negotiable. Governments should move beyond the tokenistic box-ticking exercises when it comes to young people. And young people, you need to demand this space. Tonight's session will be fleshing out these ideas, and I really look forward to the Talanoa session that will be led by Anna and Hosanna, two young, strong female leaders in their respective fields. And also I encourage those who are joining us online to join into the conversation. We want to hear from you too on how we can all build back better. Thank you, and Vinaka.
Thank you very much, Ms. Renata Ram, for the inspiring words. I hope and believe that audience and participant around has a shared. Us this evening. Are to be resilient in this period of time that we're facing here. Component in building youths. COVID-19 has had an adverse effect, as you all know, in Fiji, as well as the Pacific, and also affecting the most vulnerable stakeholders, policymakers, and even the government must try and ensure that all-inclusive approach has been mitigated as well as being implemented to all diversities when designing a COVID-19 post-future COVID-19. Aims to highlight state of youths in COVID-19, how Fiji and the Pacific youths can be part of building back better. In a few minutes, you will be hearing from our respected panelists that will be discussing today's topic, each bringing in their vast knowledge and years of experience in the field. And a special thank you to Hosanna and Kaloucava to join us this evening. The format of today's Talanoa session is that the respected panelists are given 10 minutes each to present to the audience on the theme for this Talanoa session. And that question and answers will take place after all the panelists have spoken. Please, participants and audience, do utilize the chat box or raise your hand. during the question and answer period, if you wish to ask questions to the panelists. And we would appreciate it for those who are tuning in on Zoom to mute their microphones, and as well as in order for the panelists and other participants and audience to clearly state their question, as well as for us to be able to hear clearly. Also for courtesy reasons as well. We will call out your name when your hand has been raised. And we would like you to direct your question to either. Our first panelist is Kaloucava, is the former 100 meters hurdle as well, an agriculture and mechanical college of Texas University graduate, a mental health advocate, also a program officer and research analyst for Lifeline Fiji. Without any further ado, with those few words, I would like to give Anna the floor.
Buongiorno, everyone. Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Let me thank you so much for the introduction of this beautiful event that we are here for, the safe place to discuss about this issue. One thing that captured my attention was the theme that was discussed, that was shared around the nations, which was to the transformation of food system, youth innovation. In this theme, like it has to adapt to what we are facing as youth during this pandemic. I believe what we have to understand as youth, that we have the ability to question things. We have the skills, we have the knowledge, we have the prime highlight of our age group right at this moment, where we are able to change things for what we can see from our past, from the governments, and make a better way, pave the way, learn to be a great leader. So for myself, as in the Lifeline, doing Lifeline work, I volunteer as a research analyst. Our data information that we have collected on youth is that what we have seen, that youth have the courage now to are facing challenges on their mental health. And that is our focus for Lifeline, mental health. A lot of people tend to think that mental health during this pandemic is people are going crazy, but the most important thing that we have to know is that this involves decision makings. This involves of what you can contribute to make a better change for your community, for your family, for you as yourself, as a well-being, and where we have to survive and learn to adapt to this pandemic, these policies that the government have given us, which it has been explained that it has limited us from growing. It had limited us from reaching our potential of becoming somebody. So in this kind of matter, when we identify and question it, we have to create solution. I believe most organizations, when they go through workshops, they tend to create a safe place for people for youth to discuss the matter that they face. But the problem is that people from the older generation have not tried to open the space for young people, for youth, to assure them, to give them the opportunity to help them establish the dreams, so that in order for them to learn to become better. For a fact that I have seen so many changes now, and I am so happy that Ignite for Change, for this youth platform, is just amazing, where we can discuss matters that youth are facing. And what we have seen, the matters that have been identified, is that youth face is being misunderstood, misjudged, being not given the responsibility that they are able to cope, to face those challenges, to lead. So I understand where the people are coming from, where the governments are facing to reflect on the youth. But the thing is that these kind of platforms, this is where youth need to have the maturity to grow, where they can create this awareness, to connect with more youth, to encourage them. I am seeing great change that youth are involving themselves on climate changes, to fight for that, and especially helping street dwellers, going on volunteers to psychological first aid, where people, even youth are volunteering for counseling, involving themselves to do, first responders work. This is amazing. This is them doing the opportunity to go out there, and we need more people. When we show the government, when we show the people that we want change, rather than them thinking that we still the same, we have to stop them believing that we won't change. But what I'm trying to say is that communication is the problem, where we do not listen to understand. We normally just to communicate, to reply, and that's what we have seen on safe places. A lot of people are just telling us on what to do this, listen to this. How about if we give them the space where they can create their own methods and let them grow to mature, become entrepreneurs, get them skills where they're able to help them survive, tools, skills, like things that, just to help them to survive during this pandemic. And with mental health, communication, you need to speak out what you are facing. Tell the people that what you need to share about. There are services being provided, and I would like to let people know that if you have youths that are experiencing a situation where you are with mental breakdown, there is services provided where Empower Pacific, medical, MSP, and also, of course, Lifeline is there. The services that they provide in order for people during this pandemic. They have also services for domestic violence, where Women Crisis Center can help people who are going through that. We just need to move. We need to make ways of providing support, providing help. So I encourage you all, please, youth, let's make a change. Let's stand what is right. Let's speak for those who cannot speak for themselves, that help those who cannot help themselves. Let's do things to show them that we are the future leaders. And that's the one thing that we have to let them know. Speak out, show them you have everything that you need to do to grow and be great. Naka.
your presentation this evening. I'm sure a lot of people tuning in are aware keeping fit, healthy during this pandemic, as well as trying to voice out their opinions as youths, because as we all know, youths are the leaders of tomorrow. Our next panelist this evening is Hosanna Kabakoro. Hosanna Kabakoro is the founder and director of Duatani, Fiji, a sustainable, eco-friendly clothing label, and the co-discussion hosted on Instagram Live. With those few words, I would like to give Hosanna the floor.
Oh, am I unmuted already? Well, first of all, thank you so much for having, what an honor to sit at this table and be a part of this Talanoa discussion. Can everyone hear me all right? Yeah, everybody's okay? All right, cool. I was super excited when Roderick messaged me and invited me to be a part of this, and then he sent me the topic discussion. And I really didn't have anything prepared because I'd been thinking and kind of pondering on the topic all week long. But I live in the West, you know, I live in Nandi. And I think that to try to name the ways in which young people have been affected through COVID-19 would take all evening. But one specific area that sticks out to me is employment. And because I live in Nandi, you know, we are home to Ndenarau, we're home to the Yasawa and Mamanuca Islands, which means a huge majority of our population is employed or has been employed either directly through tourism or through tourism vendors and suppliers. And the West has been feeling the brunt of COVID-19 ever since the slump in tourism and the halt in travel happened globally last year in 2020. So there isn't, I think, a single person that I know in Nandi that hasn't been directly affected by COVID-19. One way that I really look at it in regards to this discussion and this Talanoa session is of the huge percentage of people in the West that are employed or have been employed by tourism. A giant part of that group is young people and youth between the ages of 18 and 35. So for Nandi, you know, each of these huge resorts and hotels, along with airline companies, small backpacker hotels, restaurants, and many other businesses that depend on tourism, employ a giant percentage of our workforce. And job loss has affected the West deeply. And tragically, I don't think that there is a single person that hasn't been affected. My friends, my neighbors, my families have all had to change so much of their lifestyles due to a lack of income. And the sudden disappearance of our tourism industry has had such a trickle-down effect that has reached everyone in Nandi in the West, and now Suva and the rest of Fiji, from large and small business owners to small employees to non-tourism focused businesses. Everyone has in some way been affected. And young people make up the bulk of our workforce right now in Fiji. I'm not sure of the percentages, but 18 to 35 years old, that's a huge demographic in the workforce. And I think many of us that have been affected know that here in Fiji, our families are multi-generational, you know, which means in many homes, we've got our grandparents, our parents, there's us, and then there's our kids. So you've got sometimes 4 generations living in one home, and everyone contributes. And specifically speaking for the West, where we sometimes have 4, 5, 6 members of our family that live in the same home, all employed through tourism, to suddenly have more than 80% of the family suddenly out of work has impacted people's economic situations, which has caused stress, which has caused depression. On top of that, we're adding lockdowns as we've hit the second wave. We're ending, hopefully going to be ending it soon, but you know, some people have been separated from their families for going on 7 months now. And on top of all that emotional stress, you're not working. And so I think for young people, there's been a real sense of helplessness. I think there's been a real feeling of just feeling depressed and also feeling hopeless. I think hopelessness and helplessness are 2 of the worst feelings that one can feel. And I think that COVID-19 has really heightened those two feelings here in Fiji. And one way that I think that young people have been able to sort of combat this has been through social media, which is a double-edged sword. I always say social media is a double-edged sword. If you use it properly and you use it as a really cool tool that can expand your platform and issues that you want to discuss, it's a great tool to use. On the flip side, I think it can cause just as much damage and hurt. And I think we've seen that during COVID-19 here in Fiji. When I look at the second part of the question, which is how can young people, and it's such a huge question to actually I was just thinking about it all week long. I was thinking, oh my gosh, this is such a giant task to answer. But the second part of the question was, how can young people basically play an instrumental role in the rebuilding of Fiji and the region? And I think when I look at the rebuilding process and how youth can play an important role in it, the single phrase that kept coming back to me throughout the week as I was dwelling on this was community responsibility. I think that we've seen such brilliant innovation, and I think someone mentioned it earlier today, we've seen such innovation when it comes to young people creating and launching small businesses and becoming entrepreneurs during the pandemic. And for many, losing their 9-to-5 jobs gave them a push into focusing on finding different ways to provide for themselves, for their families. And many have launched these businesses that have become very successful in the last year. COVID has brought out the best of our youth, I think, in so many different ways. I think that you can see youth groups and young people banding together to create food drives, mask drives, utilizing the internet to create awareness and raise support for causes that benefit their communities that have been affected by COVID. And I think there's a really great, there have been some really great community outreaches that have been very tangible. So food drives, mask drives, pads and sanitary products for mothers that are in hospital that may need them, baby supplies. But on the flip side, one of the coolest parts of this pandemic that I've been able to experience and sort of watch and be a part of has been the intangible work that's being done. I think that one example is a great group of young men that have started a podcast platform called Engine 6. And it was founded by this group of friends that decided that a lot of topics pertaining to masculinity and being a male in Fiji aren't widely discussed. And recently they just discussed mental health and male depression in Fiji and how COVID has enhanced that or magnified that. And they came up with different ways to cope and deal with your mental health. And I think that leads back to a lot of what Anna was saying earlier with how important it is to be able to identify when you are feeling some way or some type of way, and being able to be humble enough and open enough to reach out for assistance and help. And that's what Lifeline is, which I think is absolutely brilliant. I love what they do. And so basically in closing, I think that using Engine 6 as this example of a great way that young people have used the internet and social media to create positive change and to become positive change makers has been just one example of the many different things that young people are doing to help one another cope. I mean, nobody was given a handbook on how to cope during lockdowns and losing your job and having to suddenly provide for your family who have also lost their jobs. And so being able to come onto platforms, oops, sorry, I just hurt my microphone. Being able to come onto platforms like this one and discuss in a safe space and come up with ideas and solutions to these issues that we're facing as a region and as a country, I think is great. I think it's a beautiful thing that Ignite for Change invited us all on here. I really hope that young people that are tuning in tonight are challenged. I hope that we are enabled and encouraged to get out there and create the best positive change that we can according to our ability. Nakavakalevu. I hope that everybody could hear me and see me. My internet kept going in and out.
Yes, forgive us, participants. if just keep going on and off because of technical problem as well as network. But Talanoa session. We will now open the floor for question and wasting to please participants and audience. Do you chat box or raise your hand? I would appreciate it if members of the audience or any individual speaks just for courtesy reasons. We will name when you have your question to the respected panelist without any background noise, and keep your questions concise. To most critical changes that we as youths must make to face the future effectively.
Anna, if you didn't hear that, I think Virginia was trying to ask you a question. One of the questions was, what are the most critical changes that we as young people must make to face the future effectively? What are your thoughts on that, Anna?
Okay, thank you. So the critical thing, that a change that would help the youth to do is probably to find inspiration, motivation, something that makes forward, makes them to realize, to mature the responsibility, to mature, to identify the maturity level that they are in is by involving themselves of what can they do to help their youth peers, to stop influencing people in the wrong way, stop bullies, I apologize for that, to stop bullies. In a way to when we are talking to people or elders, I believe one way that we can do is just to respect them. Respect is something that we have lost, and we have to remind ourselves about it, because during this pandemic, we just tend to forget about our values, our manners, like our ways of being considerate. But as time has changed, youth are now that they are able to identify, to become leaders so that they can help their families, create ways of trying to solve matters where projects and proposals are being shown on posters by other organizations. In that matter where they can talk with their youth communities, get them together, encourage youths to join, give them ways to be motivated, something that capture their attention. And social media, by the way, is just right there. What Hosanna have just said, like it's a weapon. It can be used against people and it can encourage people. It's just how we motivate them. That way, we just need to utilize that, create a way for them to be aware of who they are as youth, the decisions that they make, the growth that they can reach, the potentials, and just to show and remind them what they really want to be, like who they want to be, create the person they want to be. and they have the opportunity of choosing that, the decision making. So that's my side of point for that questions. Naka.
Probably just as well. Hosanna, did you have any thoughts on that, what Anna had just shared earlier?
Yeah, I think in terms of what Anna was saying about, creating the person that you want to be, I think that's so powerful. I think that when you realize that you have the power to become anything that you want to be, to create any type of change that you want to create, whether it be positive or negative, that's up to you. And so I think for anyone tuning in tonight, I say, if you see an issue or a problem or something in your community that you keep saying you have the solution for, or you keep talking about, take that extra step, create that change, implement that solution. And I think only in that way can we continue to grow, and will we be able to not only rebuild things back to, we always use the word normal, but to make things better, not only for ourselves, but for future generations.
Thanks for that. Virginia is just having a bit of technical issues, but as young people, we'll need to be more resilient during this time. So probably what I wanted to just dive right in, just to assist Virginia as well, is Hosanna. So Virginia had this question for you. What are the common misconceptions people have about young people? And also, in terms of moving forward, how can we combat these misconceptions and communicate it more effectively in our societies?
Sorry, you just cut out towards the end. Would you just repeat the second half of that?
Sure, no worries. It's how can we as young people combat the misconceptions and communicate it more effectively? This is the common misconceptions that people have about.
Whew.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, wow. I think since the beginning of time, youth and young people have been underestimated. And I think time and time again throughout history, we've been able to see how powerful youth can be when they band together and create positive change. I think if you look at the civil rights movement, that's evident. I think if you look at the way that technology has taken center stage in our everyday lives, it's also evident there. So I think in terms of, I think it's difficult in the Pacific specifically because of our culture. I think we have a very deeply rooted respect for your elders. Part of our culture that does make it very difficult sometimes to speak up or to make yourself heard if you're disagreeing or if you have maybe a different point of view. We do tend to sometimes just keep those opinions to ourselves until we move out, and then we kind of like keep them away from our family if we can, if it goes against what our family believes in. And so I think for us in the Pacific and in Fiji specifically, all of our dominant cultures in the Pacific put huge respect on how you treat your elders and how you speak to your elders. And basically it's children are seen and not heard until you're like 45. So I think social media, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok even, I finally got on TikTok. I put it off for as long as I could, but I finally got on TikTok. And I'm actually really surprised. It's not all dancing. There's some really amazing content that young people are putting out these days. And I think that is now the voice of our generation and the generations that are coming up after us. Social media is how we make ourselves heard. I think the internet is a tool that young people use every single day, nonstop. I don't even know how many hours I'm on my phone or a laptop or, So I think it comes back to using your platforms correctly, going back again to something that Anna mentioned earlier, using your platform correctly. You can use your platform in any way that you want. It is your platform. You have the freedom to post anything you want, to say anything you want. But imagine all the amazing things you could do if you used your platform to create positive change. And that's how I think that our generation and the generations that are coming up after us are going to be heard.
Thanks for that, Hosanna. So Virginia and I, we're sort of going to swap roles for a moment. Virginia is taking care of our Facebook Live questions. So as Virginia had mentioned earlier, our platforms have just opened. So during the course of it, I think there have been some interesting conversations. So we are now opening the floor now for members that are joining in on Zoom, as well as those that are tuning in on our Facebook Live. If you do have any questions, please post them to Eva. And of course, we'll ask both Hosanna and Awana to answer your questions. I noticed there was somebody that had their hands raised on the Zoom chat. Let me just give you a moment. So we noticed that Tamani Rarama had raised her hand. Tamani, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes. So
Yes.
Tamani, yeah, you can ask your question and direct it to which of the panelists that the question is for. Thank you.
Thanks. Very, very quickly, thank you to all the panelists for sharing. Just a deep reflection and just probably like a comment rather than a question is that, you've brought up so many things about the current live realities, especially with COVID, whether we're talking about mental health or we're talking about economic in the aspect of like people losing employment and jobs and etc. And I think in reality, when we look back at what this pandemic has really done, instead of like putting the perspective from, in a way like, I mean, definitely people are getting frustrated. There's a lot of like, unhappiness in the sense that's happening within the community, within the society because of all these sort of like, emotions taking over from losing all this employment and etc. But at the light of it, I think one of the key things that, particularly with young people, that I've seen in building back better is the partnerships and collaborations that has come forth, and you see it in so many different spaces, whether it's within the fashion industry, whether it's within the youth movement, particularly within the NGO movement. I've seen youth groups set up different and various kind of spaces to allow dialogue, communication, but also to collaborate on projects like Hosanna has shared on, like, whether it's on sanitary pad, kids, etc. And one of the key things that I also feel just when you look at this pandemic is that, it's pulling people back into realizing what really is sort of like the most key thing for the livelihood of people, and that's agriculture. And when you look at tourism, etc., all these industries exist because of agriculture. And it's either agriculture from within our context here in Fiji, or it's from abroad. And so I think one of the key things that and one of the partnerships that came out recently with this International Youth Day as well was that there was a collective group of organizations, youth-led organizations, that decided to say, enough with all these virtual calls, enough with all this planning and organizing, etc. Enough with the talking, and let's start doing. And so there was this key interest to ensure that young people are brought back into the space of like, nurturing them with like, all this agricultural learning, but also to potentially pull them off these economic sort of like challenges that they're going through, especially when it comes to livelihood, fresh food on the table, not having, to deal with all these transactional things with like, going to the supermarket and etc. And so, and Renata also pointed out a very key thing, and that when you look at the geopolitical space right now, like we are currently in a very chaotic space. Like, our leaders are not working in sync with the different machineries of the government, working in collaboration with like civil society organizations to sort of like pull us out of this crisis that we're in. And so the onus is really on the people. And I think this sets a very key thing for young people to pull up our socks and say, like, we are still at the stage and at the place where we are able to influence policies. And a lot of these policies, a lot of these bills that are coming in, they are not including the voices of young people. And I think with collaboration and partnerships, not only does it builds on movement, but it builds movement that are able to work together to be able to still participate in these processes. And I think when we are talking about like building back a better Fiji from this pandemic crisis, etc., this is what we essentially need, the partnership. Enough with like working in silos, and we've seen that so much in different kind of spaces, doesn't work at all. And it's about time that everybody holds hands together and work together towards that frontier where we're able to sort of like pull ourselves out from this dirty mess that we've been like, you know, most of us grew up, you know, not during, but when coups were happening. So our lived reality since we were born has never been a stabilized one. And it's about time that we take back that, you know, and I think we have the momentum, we have the energy, we have the expertise as well. Whether we have the expertise that's needed, we can always step into the, you know, build onto like intergenerational learnings, get all those mentors out there who have worked so passionately on these issues into these movements that we are building, and then get them to inspire, but also to motivate us in the different groundings that we are working on. So yeah, just very quickly, that was what I wanted to share. Agriculture, key influences of young people within all this thing, because right now a lot of us are dealing with like, you know, the very social, not that I'm saying that it's bad, but like within like, you know, the grassroots movements and exactly, but it's also important that young people are also influencing these policies and things that are going in, because at the end of the day, we are the ones that are affected. We are the ones that are paying taxes for all these new things that are coming in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tamani, for that. Did Hosanna and Anna, did you want to continue or just wanted to add your thoughts as Tamani was sharing those points? Any additions to that? No particular order.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Tamani, for that powerful statement, and which is true. At this kind of time where the safe place have been, you know, given and been provided the platform where we are discussing the issues and all, we have to take the action. We have to, and which is so true. The government, they need to be aware that we are tired of all these crises where people are now portraying their anger on so many things. They don't know where to put their anger on. It's been confusing people now. So it's crazy where all these things been happening. It's so chaotic. It's so true. So the thing that what I can, you know, explain from that statement is that, you know, the world is a dangerous place, not because of those who do evil, which is interesting, but it's because of those who just look on and do nothing. So why can't we just be like that? Be the change makers, be somebody to be responsible of our next generation, where now they are not being our leaders, now they are not aware of what is happening. We can try and do and make a move, voice it out. Like, it's so true that what we have to discuss now, like, it's time for action. It's time for a change. We have to make the movement. The best way is to find the right organization where the leaders of that organization are opening to discuss about issue where it needs to be done, created, find ways. At this point, like, youths are making so much noise, like they are voicing out their problems. There's so much noise everywhere where people are discussing about this and this and this. It's time for something different. We have to make action. Action speaks louder than words. So why can't we work together and create a change and make a better future for our next generation, for our children? And something that we have to look on about. And thank you again, Tamani. I really am grateful for that statement that you have shared. Naka.
my turn. Yeah, Tamani, thank you. That was really insightful. I think you pretty much covered it all. I really don't have much more to add on to that, except to add on to what you mentioned about just like political instability here in Fiji. We do have quite a, I think we're going on 4 or 5 generations. And I think that, you know, when it comes to policies and anything to do with government or anything like that, I tend to sort of not have a public opinion a lot of the time. So I'm gonna sit this one out. I do agree with a lot of what you said though.
Thanks so much to both Hosanna and Anna for just adding in.
Am I still on? Oh,
for adding in your comments and all. By the way, while we have Virginia's just sending me, we've got like quite an interesting amount of questions coming in. So Virginia's just pulled out a question from, I think, our Facebook platform. This question is from Joanna, and it's directed to both Hosanna and Anna. So I think we'll start off with Hosanna, and then Anna can add on from there. The question is, in rural communities who are disadvantaged in accession information, what are ways would you as an individual recommend to empower young people? And of course, how are we including them in this change and journey? I'm more than happy to repeat the question.
sorry, could you just repeat the question? Your internet kind of cut out, so I missed the basically the whole question.
No worries. Let me just read that out again. So the question is, in rural communities,
Oh, sure. Or maybe if
so in rural
Right.
communities who are disadvantaged in accession information, what are the ways in which we are trying to engage young people?
do you think you could I'm just gonna, I think she's going to send the question via chat and I'll be able to read it because the internet keeps cutting out. So I'll just, can everyone hear me? Everyone can hear me okay? So hopefully everyone is to ignite change in rural communities who are disadvantaged in accessing information. What ways would you recommend we empower these youth? Are we including them in this change journey? This is such an important topic to raise because I grew up in rural Sabsavu. So I grew up at my dad's village, in my village of Naweni. So I grew up about half a mile outside of my village. And I grew up as a typical rural kid. And, you know, I had to walk with everyone else a good hour and a half, sometimes to and from school every day. So collectively, it was an hour and a half. We were barefoot. And a lot of times accessing technology was difficult back then. I think that now, in order to create positive change, again, and we said this earlier, it's taking that first step of finding the way to do that or a solution. And so I think that's evident in a lot of rural areas, in a lot of rural communities and villages and settlements. I think that young people have the power to make that change. And I think you can see it. I know that there are lots of youth groups in villages and communities and rural settlements that create a lot of positive change. So I think in order to include our youth that are from those areas, when COVID finishes or when we're able to open things up again, it would be really cool to maybe have some of these NGOs or organizations that are going to be facilitating some of this change, not forget to include our rural youth and to head up and have Talanoa discussions with them and find out what ways they feel they can be instrumental in implementing change. I hope that made sense.
Yes, it does. Anna, your thoughts?
Yes, for that question, one way that we can empower this youth is that at this moment I am living within my brother's place at the village. What I've seen is that, you know, they do have youth organizations, but one thing that really lacks in is, you know, getting the youth to get involved, which is quite hard because some of them are just, you know, they're concerned of matters with their own family issues, expectation from their family, rather than because they think being part of those organization for youth in order to develop them and upskill them with skills. They tend to think otherwise it's better for them to be in the farming area and all those stuff. So one way that we can do to empower them is just organization where they are able to provide them the resources, provide them the utensils, equipments where to hear the problem that they're facing, which is probably the employment issues of providing money for their family, food on the table, tools in order to help them with their farms for getting income, those kind of stuff where we have to realize the solution that they need. So in order to get that, I believe that the youth organization really needs to find ways to inspire them, to pull them, motivate them, and find them a purpose. Because I believe some of them are just confused on the purpose, their responsibility. What do they really need to do to get involved? What is the whole purpose of the youth organization for them? That's the thing. We just need them to get in, to lure them on ways where they can upskill the potential that they need in surviving. Because at this point, they just don't really care what, you know, orders and all those stuff. They just need ways of resources where they can survive, to support, to provide for their family. So organizations need to give that space to encourage youth organization from the village, especially interiors, hear out what they really need, create resources for them, and see the methods of how they are carrying it out, and inspire more youths, basically. So that's what I maybe I don't know if I'm making sense, but I hope that's what it can, you know, what answer that can give to that question. Naka.
So much. I just wanted, while we're on, we still have our special virtual guest still with us this evening. Renata, with the conversations that have been happening, just also to the last question that was shared, you know, where, you know, the young people, they've already echoed what they really need on the ground. So, you know, how can stakeholders such as your organization and others sort of support or provide those avenues for young people? What are your thoughts on that, Renata?
Thank you, Patrick. You know, most UN organizations, we have young people at the center of our response, because as I added in my opening remarks, that young people are the future, the architects and builders of what the future world should look like. And we have invested greatly in capacity building, helping young people be more empowered, and also negotiating with governments on how we can actually get more people into decision-making spaces. And, you know, it was very interesting, the question about rural communities. And this is very evident in the Pacific as well, about the barriers young people place on themselves to be part of decision-making or even having their voices heard. And both panelists have spoken about this as well, about that element of respect. Yeah, and I think we need to change as well, behavioral change about what are the benefits of us speaking out, but also communicating in a way that suits the different generations and that does not seem disrespectful. And one very important thing, you have to remind people they were once young. Yeah. So been here before, so they understand. It's about having that open conversation in a good way that would not disrespect anyone, and to talk about the greater benefits that will come out of this.
Thanks so much, Renata, for those points. I think that's really interesting coming as well from that aspect, from a stakeholder's point of view. We've noticed that one of our members on the Zoom has raised his hand. Ruveni Ambakivo. Ruveni, if you could just unmute yourself and also ask a question and direct it to one of the panelists this evening. Thank you.
This is more of a comment rather than a question. And please feel free to chime in and share your thoughts. For me personally, I believe that as young people, what we can do, what we want to do, and what we should do solely depends on what we know. And the truth is that we don't know enough. Another thing is we are not asking the right questions. So I feel that education is key, and not just academic education, but holistic. And it starts at the home, in your neighborhoods, in the communities. It starts around conversation, you know. You guys mentioned earlier that technology is a tool that can benefit young people. I solely agree. I wholeheartedly agree. It is a tool that can benefit us if it is used correctly. And a good example is a few nights ago on the news, there was this lady that started her own entrepreneurial venture, that she was selling gift cards, or those cards that you send to your birthday cards and whatnot. For me personally, she did not learn that in school. No, she learned it on her own self. She took her initiative to better herself by finding the appropriate skills through technology. And I feel that as young people, we can all do and achieve the same. You know, I'm always on TikTok, and I'm always on Facebook, and I'm just amazed at the level of talent that the younger generation have when it comes to dances, when it comes to music, and you know what they do on social media. That's the level of how we say, the type of energy. If they could use that to help them better themselves, you know, maybe go on YouTube and watch some podcasts, or read some hear some podcasts, or learn how to bake. And you know, the information is out there. I believe solely that you can learn more on anything through Google and YouTube than you can in a classroom. And that's true, because information is flowing freely and at a rapid pace. So I believe that as young people, we need to take the initiative to, instead of talking about things that do not benefit us, you know, amongst our friends and our peers, we can talk about things that can help motivate us to become our better selves, you know, whether it be enhancing talents, making money, you know. You mentioned earlier about people crying out with a lot of problems. That's true. A lot of people are falling into depression, you know, they're having mental problems, you know, and they resort to alcohol and other stuff. But what if they learn, you know, that there's a better way, you know, that there are ways that they can better themselves? I feel that it is personally the way forward for them. And that's just my thoughts. Please chime in, and thank you for allowing me this opportunity to share my thoughts. Thank you.
Well, with those contributions, we'll probably start with Hosanna, since you're also an entrepreneur. So Hosanna, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that the doorway to any sort of a future is a formal education. I think that if you have a really good foundation, you can branch into anything. And I know that we've got one of the creative, I think creative directors of VO, I just saw that has logged on, Navi Fong. And I think Navi is a testament to how using your, God-given gifts, if you will, or natural talent to create and following your passion and following, Navi's passion is his art. And he has been able to create a career for himself using his art. And I think that that's something that a lot of young people in the Pacific either haven't been told before, or maybe we disregard it based on, expectations or feeling required to get a, typical 9-to-5 job. But what Navi's done in creating himself a niche along with other artists in the Pacific and creating a sustainable income and career for themselves is really no different from somebody starting up a business. It all goes back to following what you feel, where you feel your life should go. And I think that, and I'm saying I think a lot because I don't want anybody to be quoting me. This is all opinion, but I really genuinely think that when you're young, like I'm going to be 30, and I've changed and evolved so much since I was like 16, 18. I feel like every couple of years I've evolved and learned new things and found new parts of myself that I didn't know exist. And I'm now in, a career path that is something that is so far beyond anything I ever thought I'd be doing when I was 30. But I think that being open to following, as corny as it sounds, your heart and your passion, it can lead you to just learning so much about yourself and what you are able to do. Sorry, I'm getting distracted.
Is it my turn? Okay. Ruveni, thank you so much for that point of view. That's very true. Where we are able to know the importance of education, right? It's not about academic wise, because things that are being taught to us in school, I'm not going to say it's bad. I'm just saying, like, from my point of view, education from schools is systematic, like things that has been trained on us for us to work under the system. Where for self-education, like you've just said, where you can learn whatever you want, it's provided. It's how you utilize those social medias, those apps that has been provided. When you take the chance that you think this is beneficial for you, it's not bad to stop something that you want to learn. If you have to search more learning stuff from online, one thing I've always learned so much, in fact, I know it's not really real information, but it always pops up some new creative things is from Pinterest. I don't know why, but I love Pinterest. That social media for me, like it shows skills, some ways where you can improvise wood to pot plants to vegetation to knitting clothes, fashion, like anything. So that's true. I agree. Self-taught education, self-learn, choose that path because you learn more. If school, well, I'm not going to say to discourage youths to stop going from school to reach their dreams, but there's something where you just want to break out. You don't want to be a boss by somebody else. You just want to be your own boss. So that's how you can do. Like I'm so amazed how Hosanna have done business, requires being young like her and organizing business by self-teaching, or maybe this is her passion, her hobby of within fashion and style. So that's where you can go. That's she did that because out of happiness. She finds joy in doing that. So why can't we do that? Find something and teach our own self, some skills that we want to just teach ourselves. So yeah, Nakarubeni, I appreciate your point of view. Naka.
I want to add to that. Just to add on to what Anna just said, I think that something my parents always taught me is if you have a solid foundation, which is in a formal education, it gives you the freedom to be able to pursue different careers or try different things. As long as you have that solid foundation, you can really do anything and succeed at doing anything. So I think it is important to nurture talent, to nurture one's passions. But I think it is really important for us to stress to young people that are listening and that may still be in school. Having that foundation is one of the most important things that you can attain in your life. And it gives you in your future the freedom to be able to pursue your passions, if that's something that you feel, a direction that you feel your life should take. So stay in school, kids.
Thanks so much for that, Hosanna and Anna. We're just being concise with time. We've got just a few more questions. Our next question comes from Matilita Mbondromo. So Matilita, you can unmute yourself and also direct your question to one of our panelists. Matilita?
Hi, yes, hi, thank you. Thank you both for sharing. I think for me, I really just stumbled upon a post about this Talanoa, and I just decided to register, and I'm really glad that I did. I just wanted to say thank you for sharing. You both spoke about finding inspiration to do something and make those changes. So I guess something a bit more personal, just to get to know you both a bit better, and this question is actually from myself and one of my friends who's commented on Facebook. So I thought I'd just say it here is, what or who inspired you both, to become advocates of the youth? So yeah, thank you.
Probably we'll start off with Anna and then we'll go to Hosanna. So Anna, let's start with you.
Thank you. For me, what inspired me to be on the field where I'm interested, which is Lifeline Fiji. I mostly love to study human behavior, people's emotions. And this is something that I was interested when I went to the States to study about this subject, where, I've realized that there's so much trauma, there's so much unsolved issues that our people in Fiji are facing. And why can't I do something? And what inspired me to be a counselor or a research analyst was my mom. She's always been an inspiration for me because I've always seen her helping people to evaluate themselves, to evaluate the issue that they're going through, that not to let their surroundings control themselves, their emotions, because, crises are just temporary, but you and I, we are forever. We are here to stay. And that's why when my mother gave me that idea that we are here to stay, to make an impression, to help a better world. And that's why I've always wondered, what would it be something different if we were young to just inspire more youth? Because we normally get inspired by, older leaders, wiser people. So why can't we, as generation of ourselves, to learn more and inspire our own generation and show them that, to help is actually cool. It's not lame. It's actually powerful, where we can create change. So that's why I want to be this person right now, where I can talk to people, inspire people, that they can be whoever they want, as long as they have the right tool, right skills to make a change, something that benefits you and I, and our people around us. Naka.
You know, I was raised in a very service-focused, service-minded family. And so being involved in anything that has to do with my community or being involved with young people or youth has kind of always just been second nature, thanks to the way that I was raised. For me, you know, I was a journalist and a writer, and I was always a really avid supporter of the local fashion movement, and had been since I moved back to Fiji from the States. But I never understood how much work and thought and effort went into each of those collections that I used to go and watch and, you know, applaud at Fashion Week and at different events that had to do with fashion. And when I met my partner, he said, well, this is something that you're so interested in, like maybe this might be something you might want to look into doing. You talk about it all the time. You're constantly having, you know, your tailors make you all these little clothes and little outfits and stuff. He said, maybe you should start thinking about doing this as a business. And, you know, I've learned so much about myself, putting myself outside of my comfort zone. Oh, my speaker just died. Putting myself outside of my comfort zone. And like, this is where I feel very comfortable. I feel like this is very much my safe space, speaking with young people, you know, creating positive dialogue. And I have a platform on Instagram called Talanoa Tuesdays, where we discuss issues and topics that are relevant to young people. So this is very much my safe space. With Duatani, I willingly have put myself out there and put myself in a space that I'm very unfamiliar with. And I'm really enjoying learning new things every day, learning how to run a business, learning how to have a staff, learning accounting and books and bookkeeping and all of these things that are just so foreign to me. And it's one of the things that's kept me busy during the pandemic, next to my children, have been driving me crazy, is learning how to be a businesswoman and learning how to be a business person. And so for me, I think I've always been somebody that really enjoys a challenge. And this has been one of the biggest challenges that I've ever faced in my life, but I'm really enjoying it. So that's kind of what's driven me to be where I am right now in life.
Thanks so much for that, Hosanna and Anna. Really interesting conversations that are currently taking place. We've got Vilitati Kolavatu. Vilitati's hands is raised. Vilitati, you can ask your question, and also please direct your question to the respective panelists. Vilitati, over to you.
Thank you, Broderick. My question is directed to Ms. Anna Kaloucava. I volunteer and I work with the Drug Free World Fiji. Our main focus is on substance abuse and issues relating to substance abuse, such as gender-based violence and other issues. My question is, being an indigenous person, and we live in a culture, we live in a community, that is culturally sensitive, and we have these social issues and that are coming up, and the youth programs that are somehow culturally sensitive. How do you enhance cultural competence in young people?
Naka for that question, Vilitati. So it is true. Our culture is something that we have to be very careful about, you know, talking about these sensitive issues, whether it's in drug and substance abuse, gender violence, human rights, or even LGBT, all of those stuff. We need to, in a way, to create that topic, to normalize it, is by, giving them a relative state of example of issues where they can be relatable and understanding. A lot of people that when they all from those areas where they are trying to understand our project, our program, what we wanted to explain to them, they tend to think that it's against their belief, right? So I believe is just one way to explain it to them before we start. I would like to address that this matter is real, is actually happening, where youths are struggling to voice out their issue, to feel comfortable in addressing this matter, because this is what it's hidden, and it's taking our youths, it's taking their lives, it's taking them their safety, their security. So what we will address this matter is that what you can do to help us to let the people know and learn more and able to accept them and to teach them, rather than judging them, rather than excluding them, rather than putting more burdens on them. We have to let them in and show them that they are accepted. Because sometimes people tend to do those kind of stuff because they don't accept it. So we have to make them understand it, why this issue matters, why we need to address it, because it is going to affect the next generation. So I understand where you're coming from, where substance abuse have to address. It's even for suicide, where we have to discuss that matter. It's very sensitive. It's against religion. It's against sometimes culture, because they're embarrassed about it, that one of their family members have completed it. So it's quite sensitive. So one way where we have to do is just to be sensitive in approaching it, where we have to direct it on another way, where they have to understand us. Questioning them with a question, basically. What would you do to help your children? We are here to create an awareness. We're here to create people to connect issues that matters. So that way that's one way where you can approach them, by giving them a interesting introduction where it captivates their interest, to lure them, to question what is your program, to lure them what is your mission. So that's what what's my answer is. I don't know if it would be reflecting to your questions, but yes. So it's about how you can approach it in a way where they can be related to it. Does it really matter? So you just have to think out of the box, rather than thinking inside where it's been structured. Like, we have to let them know this is this. No. Give them a question to answer it themselves and make them evaluate that question program about. Naka.
Thanks, Anna, for that. Renata, what are your thoughts on that?
Thank you, Broderick. I just want to add on to what Anna is saying. And Navi, that's a very important question. I have worked extensively in indigenous communities, especially here in Fiji. And one of the things that really worked for us is finding a champion to actually help us have that conversation. And some of the key examples that I can share with you is working through the women's groups. The mothers, they're always the first one to take in all the hard questions, to actually address this. And it's usually the Turang Nikoro's wife or the village nurse who actually is your entry point into starting these conversations and getting more people's eyes open to see the benefits that could help the community. And, when you're talking, you're specifically talking about drugs. And we are still in this denial that hard drugs is not available in Fiji. People are not using it, but we know that it is happening. And to just further add to that, a lot of people are actually using needles, injecting drugs and sharing these needles. And that, I want to add, is another form of how HIV can be spread. So these bits of information need to be shared as well in terms of empowering the different communities that you would like to work with and really tackle these tough questions and tough discussions.
Probably before, thank you, Renata, for this. Probably before I see that Navi's hand is raised, before Navi said, Hosanna, did you even want to add of any additional points given the conversations that have taken place?
I think that they covered that pretty well. I think that a really interesting point to raise about this evening is as I'm scrolling through our members here on Zoom, I'm not seeing any representation of our Indo-Fijian community here tonight. And I'm wondering, is there something that we're missing in terms of reaching young Fijians that are of Indian descent? Is there something that NGOs or that, you know, those of us that are advocating for youth issues are missing? Is there something that we can be doing to make situations like this and evenings like this appealing to them? Because I'm seeing a lot of really great points being raised about the Indigenous community. And as an Indigenous Fijian woman, I'm just so excited to be hearing all of these amazing points that have been raised this evening. But I think it is going to be, I think inclusion is going to be a really interesting topic as we move forward in rebuilding, because we can't do it alone. We need everybody to be able to rebuild. So I think it would be really interesting to look into how we can engage members of the Indo-Fijian community.
Thanks so much for that, Hosanna. Our next question, of course, is coming from Navi. So Navi, if you could unmute yourself and also direct your question to the respected panelists. Thank you so much, Navi, for joining us. So Navi, go right ahead.
Okay, can you guys hear me? Yes, you can. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this engaging discussion. It's been so enlightening to hear everyone's views. I am actually glad that Hosanna brought up the topic of inclusion, because that's kind of a nice segue into what I was going to ask. And that was to do with, just because I'm hearing like this really strong undertone of like being innovative and being bold and stepping up and speaking out. And, you know, it sounds great. It sounds great. And Hosanna had a little plug-in for me, thank you. You know, talking about pursuing your dreams and going after your passion. And I think one thing, like that's something that is echoed globally, but one thing we need to keep in mind, especially in our context as Pacific Islanders, and particularly as Fijians, is that something like that is a big ask of us, because it almost commands or demands a certain level of boldness and even, like, for lack of a better word, defiance. Going back to what Anna had said about, you know, having been and living with her brother in the village, and the youth there being fully within capacity to organize things, but just people not going to these events and not, like Hosanna just said, not taking interest in events like this. And I think there's something to be said about our context within our culture, our families, the intergenerational topic that came up earlier, and what it means to ask a Fijian young person to say no to their upbringing, to say no to the people, their pillars, you know, or to like even step outside the line and step outside of that box that we keep telling everyone to think outside of. That's a really huge ask. And I think as people who are trying to reach this audience, reach what is often termed as the grassroots, like our approach and how we present ourselves is such an important thing. And I think there's something very elitist about the language we use sometimes, or the platforms we choose to use. And then we wonder why we're talking to the same ears and why we talk in circles. And sorry, I get quite, I can ramble, but that's kind of where my thoughts are at the moment. And I was hoping to just share that. And personally, as someone who works with youths and has worked with youths for a long time now within the creative industries as a dancer and a person who teaches dance, one way that I've, within my experience, that I found I can access youths quite most effectively, it's not like the best way, but most effectively in my experience is to, I think Renata mentioned having a champion, and I'm not sure if I have the right understanding of what that is, but having like, we always bring people who are dancers now within our company who have a success story and came from somewhere that people can relate to. You know, there was a boy who is now dancing in the UK who was a shoeshine boy, and he came to auditions. So we, like, as part of our intake or as our recruitment, we take Rusiate back to his yasa and he speaks to the people there. And he tells them, I am from here. Do you see yourself in me? And do you want to be somewhere else? Do you want to bring something back to this community? Because I've done it. Here's my story. And people relate to stories, not statistics, in my opinion. Like, we can't keep putting up charts and paragraphs and expecting people to be inspired. I think people need to hear stories and they need to be inspired by stories. And, you know, the very few people who have done it without that, we are privileged. Like, we either grew up with privilege. I have a phone in my hand. I can access Zoom. I have data. Not everyone, not all youth can do that. So it is almost our obligation to go back and provide our story so that, you know, they can do that for themselves. That's all I wanted to say. And I wanted to hear people's thoughts on that. Thank you so much for letting me speak.
Thanks so much, Navi. Really do appreciate that. Probably, let's get the reaction now from Hosanna first. Hosanna, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I just agree with everything Navi just said. I think Navi is one of my favorite people in the world to have really serious discussions about topics and things that are important to young people. He always brings such a different point of view, and he always is really relevant. So I value his opinion and outlook really deeply. I think what he said about, and again, going back to the champion, my dad grew up in Raiwanga, and he was the youngest son of 6 kids, and you know, really didn't have much going for him. And he has a master's degree. He's one of the smartest people I know today. But one of the things that he has always done throughout my entire life was to bring us back here. So we've lived all over the world with him and my mom and the work that they do. But one of the most important things that he ever did for me was to bring me home and allow me to watch him go back to his village and go back to Raiwanga. And my partner is from Rawai, and we work as closely as we can with the community. And we feel like it's really important that, you know, young people in our community, so my community is the RRA and Naweni village in the Conrove. It's important that the young people that are in my village see me and see other people like me that are from my village and from their village. And I think that in that way, anyone can be a champion. You know, you don't have to be given the opportunity officially. If you're from your village and you're out there and you're doing something and you've got a career and you're making change for yourself and your family, you're a champion. And all it takes is you going back to where you're from. And I think with the Itauke community, you know, the way that we introduce ourselves, where you're from is one of the most important things about your identity. And so when it comes to reaching Indigenous youth, you know, it goes back to you taking that initiative and going back to where you're from and saying, hey, I noticed that, you know, you're a really good writer. Is this something that you might want to pursue? Here's some context. And then it goes back to networking. And so anyone can be a champion. And I think what Navi said about, you know, Rusiate, going back to the Yasa and telling the kids, hey, look, you know, I'm dancing in Europe. Is this something you might want to do? Is a perfect example of that. So anybody can be a champion. Anybody can create effective change. It just, again, comes down to us taking that first step to take that initiative. Man, I gotta go put my kids to sleep, y'all.
Yeah, thanks for that, Hosanna. Probably just before we wind down, I think we've got, I think a majority of the questions that have come on Facebook, we've sort of answered it to and fro in our respective discussions. Probably what we'll do just before we ask the last question, we'll give the second last question to a Tavoti who's raised his hands up. So please unmute yourself and also ask your question to the respective panelists.
Okay, Bulvinaka everyone. Bulvinak to the two beautiful panelists tonight. Yeah, just a question from my end. I'm currently based here in the village, provincial, here at Batiki. Just a question to the panelists. As an indigenous with a strong traditional and faith connection, what do you think is the best strategy to implement in order for elders to accept change in our rural setup, but at the same time preserve our traditional and belief system? Yeah, that's the question, because I find it, we are all educated, and we are more tolerant nowadays. The youths are more tolerant nowadays, but when it comes to when it comes to they're still the elders, they are still reluctant in accepting these changes to come. So that is just a question to the panelists. What is the best strategies do you think that we can implement, the youth can implement for them to accept this change, but at the same time we preserve our traditional identity and belief system? We don't do away with it. I think that it's one of the fears. They are so reluctant for the change to come to our rural setup. Yeah, Vinaka.
Thanks so much for the question. I think we'll start off with Anna. Anna, just what are your thoughts on this, especially with the line of work that you're involved in?
Renata, for that. Thank you, Te, for that questions about something that can involve youth organizations and communities, communities within the village. One way where you can start from is getting the village elders, mostly the village elders that help to discuss with the organization to come within the cultures and all. But rather than getting organization and all into stuff where it gets involved with activities or what, one way we can do is to ask them if you can arrange a meeting where you can discuss matters that you are concerning matters on youths, where you can create an introductions of how you are wanting for the youths are facing right now, what they need to do to focus to equip their youths to strengthen their values. At the same time, when you are involving those elders during that discussion, you are giving them the understanding what you need as for the youth to do to involve them within the community, but also making them to reassure that they are also there to guide them, to guide the youth also, giving them an assured answers of values and culture and traditions that need to be maintained and respected still. So that's where communication is important, where you get them involved, also discuss it with them freely, matters that are being faced with the youth in the village. Tell them, break down all the matters and give them solutions on ways that can upskill the youth. Let them know that you are organizing this kind of stuff or with your youth organization points and valid points that can help them during this crisis, during this pandemic. Get them, everyone involved, communicate with them, share, like, to start from grassroots. You have to normalize all of these things where they don't have to reluctant the youth and to stop them from being a leader or to inspire them. Get them, share your message, your mission, and discuss ways and matters where you can still maintain culture and help better the generation, to help better the youth within the village, and to create change, basically. So that's one way that I believe a strategy that we normally do is where we have to discuss with our elders, leaders before, to show them the matter that you want to discuss. I hope that would be clear, or I don't know if it be valid, but I hope that's one way we have as Lifeline would do to get them involved. Naka.
Thanks so much for that, Anna, for your remarks. Just looking at the time, just been advised now that we've gone way past our time now. So I just want to take this opportunity to acknowledge our respected panelists. But before we do that, probably I'd like both Hosanna and Anna just to share their final thoughts, just to sort of leave for our audience this evening. We'll start with Hosanna first.
Yeah, I think just to add on to what Anna was saying, you know, in the indigenous space of our villages, we are given a platform every month in the Kabakoro, which is when the elders come together with members of the village and discuss issues and topics that are relevant to the village and its inhabitants or citizens, I guess. And so that's a very safe space where young people can raise concerns or issues and topics that they would like, you know, the elders to be a part of. And it's a great way to do it in a very respectful space that respects culture and tradition. And it's also using our heritage and tradition to further our message. And I think that if you come from that point of view or from that perspective of we're going to respect the traditional spaces, which are very similar to what we're having here tonight. We're calling it a Talanoa session, but I think if we respect our traditional and indigenous spaces and traditions, our message will be received better. Your message as young people will be received better than if we come in guns blazing. So I've always found that even living around the world, I've lived in India with my parents and watching them work in communities, going in with respect is always a much better way. You catch more flies with honey, right? Bees with honey, whatever that saying is, whatever the honey and vinegar saying is, you get more with honey. So I guess that's where I would come in if I was going to be, and when I do, so I do quite a bit of work in my children's village in Kandavu, my children from Nadamoto. So we do quite a bit of work with my kids' village in Kandavu and then also with my village of Naweni. And we always go through the Koro or through the village elders and then talk about what we're doing in the Kabakoro. I don't talk because I'm a girl and they don't talk in the Kabakoros usually, but hopefully that will change. We'll see.
Thanks so much, Hosanna, for that. Anna, what are your final thoughts to our audience this evening?
Okay. My takeaway for people to understand is that you are important. You are unique. You have the potential to create change. You have the decision to do something different, to impact and create ripple effect on other youths, on the future generation, on so many things beyond. So you have to enjoy what you do. And, you know, sometimes you don't really have to brag about things that you are doing, which is like, you know, helping or feeding the people or all those stuff. Let me tell you this. I admire those kind of people who keep things low, and because it shows who they are. That's humanity. And you don't really need public fame to, to acknowledge who you are, to acknowledge that you're making a change. If you do it silently, let me tell you something. When you do things silently, it makes a bigger change. People will know who you are, even though you're not on national news or what, but a small genuine act can make a big difference. And that's what I would like to share with you this lovely night. And thank you everyone who are tuning in. Thank you, Broderick, for this platform to share about these matters with youth, introducing what we are creating, which is a better change, a difference. And yes, and I had fun with this lovely evening. Thank you everyone with the questions. And I hope that we could have more of these kind of opportunities to talk about within the youth. Naka.
Thanks so much for that. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, Virginia said like we've really passed over time now, but just on behalf of Ignite for Change, can I thank both Hosanna, Anna, and of course, our special virtual guest, Ms. Renata Ram, for joining us this evening. Quite an interesting conversations that we've had. We've gone out to several issues from leadership, good governance, the creative arts, and it's very interesting to see the women's responses on these issues, and just a constant reminder to us that young people's voices matter and their voices are to be heard and recognized. With those few words, ladies and gentlemen that are joining us live, thank you so much for tuning. Thank you for all those questions. Please do, if you do have any more questions for panelists, we'll be happy to just answer them. Of course, stay tuned on our Facebook page. We will be having updates for any upcoming Talanoa sessions. Please also, when you're tagging us, please use the hashtag #BeTheChange and of course, hashtag Ignite for Change. With that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Good evening, stay safe, and God bless.